Day about, I think it was Pat Buchanan, how, you have these 4 Jewish judges, one being Feinstein, who has a dual citizenship with Israel, trying to not allow a Catholic on the Supreme Court. And people just keep saying they, when that doesn't apply to conservative or liberal. And it's the dog that doesn't bark for me as a comedian. I'm like, why won't people say one word? It's not a big deal. Just say Jewish. I feel like a fraud and I feel cruel in some of the jokes I do with other groups of people. And that kind of drew me to some of your videos where you could connect the dots without any hatred. It's just a rejection of logos. It isn't genetic. It isn't, this grand conspiracy. It's just the revolutionary spirit. And I love it. If you could fill me in on any more information, that'd be awesome.
I couldn't have written that book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. I couldn't have written it without the word logos. I just couldn't have done it. It was one of those crucial words that we don't have. We just don't have that word in English.
Yeah.
And when I was studying Greek, I saw column after column of English words that all could go back to that word logos. We have an impoverished vocabulary, and that's why I had to use that word, because otherwise I could not talk about the Jews, because there was just all of this confusion. The thing that got me started was the Iraqi war. I just couldn't believe that we were being dragged into this war. It made no sense whatsoever. And everybody knew it was the Jews who were doing this for the sake of Israel. And no one could say it. I mean, you could sometimes you could say neoconservative, but everybody knew that was a Jewish movement.
Trotsky.
And I kept thinking, well, I thought these guys were conservative. I thought I'm a conservative. How is this possible? Well, you can't deal with it politically. You have to deal with it theologically. And so what's the connection? Irving Kristol,
Wolfowitz,
the father of neoconservatism, well, he's a Trotskyite. Well, that's the opposite end of the political spectrum. From the 30s to the 80s, he goes 180 degrees, and nobody can understand what's going on because no one can use the word Jew. It's not a sin to say the word Jew.
Right.
It's not a sin to criticize Jews. Moses criticized Jews. He wasn't an anti-Semite. Jesus Christ criticized Jews, and he couldn't commit any sin. So if we're followers of Jesus Christ, we have the freedom to criticize Jews. That's what's being called anti-Semitism right now. They are losing control of the narrative because of people like you, because of institutions like the internet. They are losing control of the narrative, and now they're just trying to shout everybody down by calling everything anti-Semitism. If you say the same thing that a Jew said, like the Jews are behind gay marriage or something like that, you're an anti-Semite, even though Amy Dean said it in Tikkun magazine. This is intolerable. It's intolerable, and men of goodwill have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to take it anymore. Yes. It's not a sin to criticize Jews.
Yeah, and also it's the upside down that always draws me. Like, even the word anti-Semite, like a Semite dates back to the Assyrian Empire, and it's a group of people that spoke a certain language that includes Arabs. Like, the Ashkenazi Jewish tradition they're not even Semites. So when you're dealing with a word, like, to criticize an Arab is actual anti-Semite more than criticizing Ben Shapiro. The guy's Ashkenazi, which is closer to Italian. So it's like, when you're using words that don't even make sense, it's kind of like feminism is to remove the feminine from a woman. Like racism is to not allow yourself to be subjugated to another race based on their DNA. It's all upside down. And so that's why I don't have fear with it. And when people are like, yeah, but, you're not going to win. It's like, it's not about winning when you're at so many people that claim to be Christian are trying to do all this triangulation and being pragmatic to try and gain power. And I'm like, you just say what is and just take whatever comes at you, You
have to tell the truth. There's no way of getting around it. There's no point using euphemisms. There's no point. You just have to address the situation as truthfully as possible, and then hope that it catches on, and then let's see what happens. I think we've made great strides here. I think we as Americans are really an inspiration to the rest of the world, especially Europe. I have lots of contacts in Germany. They're scared to death in Germany. They have hate crimes legislation in Germany. They've been totally intimidated, totally whipped into submission. And oftentimes they get angry at you when you bring this up. But the other side of the coin is that we are not going to go to jail. Okay? If you say, the Jews are behind gay marriage, you're not going to go to jail. And Trump can do all sorts of things about anti-Semitism. You're not going to go to jail. And if you don't use that opportunity for the benefit of the rest of the human race, I think God will hold you responsible for your cowardice.
I agree. Lukewarm. Lukewarm is a sin, And so, I just did a funny video because I was just wondering. I don't even care that much about the Holocaust at all. I'm just wondering how you come to a number, because the climate science BS is a similar thing. Like 97% agree. And as someone who understands how science works, you can't lock in agreement as some form of polling. Like a poll doesn't mean anything. So I did a funny video about, I originally said, I'm really sorry, Jews, for saying that the Holocaust was actually, 9 gay guys who died in a rollerblading accident. So instead, I'm going to say it's 1 billion. And I'm like, now it's 1 billion. And if you go under, you're a denier, I'm a supplier. So, and people were writing from Germany being like, you could go to prison for this. Like, God bless you, big guy. They're like, if I did this video, I would go to prison. I'm like, so questioning a number puts you in prison. Making something funny puts you in prison. We're talking about an atrocity where no one alive even faced it. We're not talking about something that happened last week. This is 80 years ago, and there's people on MSNBC denying the Armenian genocide. No one talks about the Holodomor. So if there isn't a fundamental principle, it doesn't make sense. And then you can't think properly and then come to conclusion, because then your brain is fried. You can't use logic. You can't use logos.
Right. That's the main problem with Catholics. They don't know their own history, so they don't know what happened to them, so they can't react properly. That's the main problem across the board. And they've been committed to a failed experiment. This thing called Catholic-Jewish dialogue has been a disaster for the past, all going on 70 years now, 60 years, 65 to the present. It's been a disaster because it is a negation of the gospel. Over the period of time, the Jewish strategy has been let's see what we can get the Catholics to deny today. Let's get in dialogue and let's see if they'll deny the resurrection, or let's say that the Gospel of St. John is anti-Semitic. Let's see if they won't use it in church anymore. Let's go to Oberammergau. Let's subvert the Passion Play. All of this has happened because the Catholic Church simply cannot identify its enemy. Nothing has changed in this regard. You can pretend that everybody's your friend, but that doesn't mean everybody's your friend. Nothing has changed since St. Paul said, the Jews are the people that killed Christ, and they are enemies of the entire human race. That is what we believe as Catholics. That is what the Scripture says. That is our faith. Okay? We can't deny it.
Yeah,
okay?
and you said the most effective thing is to not hurt anybody. It's just to give space and recognize the space. I don't know how you described it. It was in Latin. I don't understand Latin, but there was some
Sicut Judaeus non. It was the position of the church for about 1,500 years. After the Roman Empire collapsed, the church had to take over the administration of the social order in Europe. And they realized almost immediately that Jews are a problem. They are involved in every single revolutionary movement. All of the heresies, the Arian heresy was basically promoted by Jews to destroy the church. Nothing had ever changed. So at about 600, they finally came up with a modus vivendi. No one has the right to harm the Jew, but the Jew doesn't have a right to destroy your culture either. And so between the two of those things, you can work out something. Now, I said this in the Jewish revolutionary spirit. I was immediately called an anti-Semite for taking this topic on. Okay?
Right.
Now, I kept saying, look, I said no one has the right to harm the Jew. Okay? Didn't you hear me? I said that. Every time I say it, I get censored. I get banned. So you know what happened? They banned the message. And so as a result, that message did not get out. And as a result, some guy in Pittsburgh walked into a synagogue with a rifle and started shooting Jews. Okay? The ADL is responsible for that. They are responsible for causing this violence because they're responsible for suppressing discussion of an issue that they don't want to be discussed. Okay? It's that simple.
Yeah, I agree fully that the discussions like this actually help eliminate the possibility of just random rejections of Logos, which is just shooting a bunch of innocent people in a synagogue. And if you don't, like, desperate people do these actions, and when you talk through and identify what's actually happening, it's the best case scenario for all parties. And then you realize that some people require a constant state of anxiety and depression and, disorientation where you don't know who your enemy is or why there's trans kids or why everyone in the media is saying white male is toxic, toxic, toxic. And that makes people do erratic and violations. And how successful the Catholics were of keeping ethnos, like I grew up, like the concept of white people is new. It was the Polish Catholics, the Italian Catholics, the Irish Catholics. We played CYO basketball, and it was like the Irish against the Italians. And then white became almost like this derogatory word, like what they do with cisgender, where it's like it's to marginalize normal people. So can you explain the proxy warrior and what they did with the Black Pride and then introducing the pimp and all that stuff? I found that to be fascinating. And who is the modern proxy warrior? Like 2019, what's our current proxy warriors?
The current proxy warriors are the homosexuals. And they succeeded the black population as the proxy warriors. So the NAACP was created to basically mobilize the black population. It was created by Jews to mobilize the black population, to turn them into revolutionaries, to overturn the social order. First in the South and then throughout the rest of the country. The culmination of that was the civil rights movement in the South, which was a revolution. And at a certain point, people like Harold Cruz, who wrote the book The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual in 1967, said he was in the Communist Party in Harlem. The Communist Party was run by Jews. He realized the blacks were proxy warriors. The Jews are telling us what to do for their benefit. We're not benefiting from this. And between that, there was the Stonewall riots. And at this point, as I mentioned, 73, the homosexuality is now tossed out of the DSM by the psychologist. And now the homosexual is the new avant-garde. Okay, the new proxy warrior. The best example I can give is our gay mayor of South Bend, Indiana.
Petey.
This guy, if there were ever a total stooge of the oligarchs, it is Pete Buttigieg. He was trained that way by his father. His father was the guy who brought Foucault and Gramsci to Notre Dame University. Never wrote a book, was no scholar, but he was a conniver and a political schemer of world class. He made his way all the way to an endowed chair by writing nothing. Okay, Pete Buttigieg is he's the smartest guy in Indiana. He went to Harvard. He's a Rhodes Scholar. They're going to retire his resume at the Resume Hall of Fame. He's got the greatest resume in the world. I will concede all of this type of stuff. There's only one problem here. He doesn't represent the people of Indiana. Isn't that an important issue? Don't you think that's important? Isn't that what our government is supposed to be about? That even if you're not the brightest bulb in the socket, you can still represent the people who voted for you. Well, that's not the system anymore. And Indiana woke up to this, first of all, with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, where they tried to resist the homosexual juggernaut. Then all of these CEOs come piling in from all over the country, every place except Indiana, telling Indiana, the legislators, the elected officials, they have to change their law. This is exactly what Pete Buttigieg is. And now he's going to go from mayor of South Bend, our gay mayor of South Bend, to president of the United States. I mean, what more proof do you need that he's simply a proxy warrior of the oligarchs?
And how few people vote. It's like, a guy like this will say that he got, 80% of the vote. But I think you broke down the math that it was really out of like 12% total voted, and it was against a fall guy. Was who he was running against, and how many people have just tapped out of the process because they've realized that no one represents them, and that's a powder keg. You know, I'm having these conversations not to get people to do crazy things. It's in fact, it's the exact opposite. It's historically speaking, when you have an influx of all of these proxy warrior type, agitator type people, as your currency drops to 4% of its previous worth, and you have all these kids growing up in homes without moms, dads, or on opioids or whatever. You're setting the stage for serious human catastrophe. And do you have any predictions? I mean, I know that you always say I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not God and stuff like that, but how could we possibly get out of this without bloodshed?